It's refreshing seeing a different perspective on the world. I agree with purifying the soul to tackle life's problems better. To help that, I'm trying to avoid microplastics, fluoride, and pesticides in my diet. I mean, do I need to add any more with that? What more can you do besides try to regulate your environment? And that is what you're breathing, drinking, and eating. But most importantly, out of all of that, Electric, that you might be omitting unwittingly, is what you think and what you pray for and how you grapple your imagination. Because I'll tell you, there are things that are poisonous that you can purify with prayer. Look, I know how that sounds. And I'm not a priest. So you want to consider sort of hovering over your food and forcing it to conform to your standards of purification. So I know that sounds crazy. Do not omit the only power you have in this world. You don't have the power to omit plastics and toxins and pesticides and for the most part even fluoride from the things that you take in. A lot of that is beyond your power. No one would believe you anyway. They'd laugh at you. But what is in your power is what your intention and what you hold in your mind and in your heart and in your soul, and what you amplify with your prayer and your focus and your concentration. And that is the most important out of everything. That's why prayer has been spit at, laughed at, told that it was just silly voodoo. Well, that's how you know that it's not. So it's really, really important. And I understand how difficult it is of a concept to get behind. I really understand that, because everything everything that is fed into through your eyes and your ears denigrates everything that is healthy for you. You know, I understand that. And it brings us back to movies. You're always watching people getting tortured and murdered and abused. And it bleeds in, and it pushes the capacity, and it fills up space in your psyche, and it allows less room for amplifying what you want to see more in this world, rather than what you're deceived into believing, I would say. In the Old Testament, it's a sort of an old style edict on not mixing fabrics in your clothing. So sort of like polyester. It's poly. It's mixed. It's an artificial construction. These things are ancient wisdom. Everything has a frequency, a song, a music. These things add up, and just because they tell you that nothing matters, it doesn't mean it is so. And even the fabrics that you put to your skin are going to have an effect on your body and your soul and your mind. It is what I mean. You don't want to believe it? That's fine. But the things that you wash your clothes with are going to have an effect on you. There are very few things that you have the power to alter. A lot of things they really, you can't escape them. Even if you try to get off the grid. I mean, some bad things can happen to you out there. Or there's things in nature that are sort of artificial. There's all different kinds of things. It's a real thing. Ancient wisdom that's been laughed at. No. You do have power, but a lot of things in this world that convince you to abdicate. The biggest power you have is what you think, what you pray for. It's important to remember. What was important was the protocol to discerning not only fabrics that were contaminated, but fabric itself, whether it be the fabric of your thinking, the fabric of the weights, the scales in your heart, let's say weighing your heart against a feather if you want to get Egyptian about it. It's important to have a system in which you understand and are able to identify when something is contaminated, whether it be what you feel or what you're thinking, how your life is going, what you have in your life, the things around you, or maybe even the clothes. Maybe you have leprosy, you know. But it's not exactly about the clothing. It's about what you have inside of you. That everyone has a contamination in some way or another. And if you're blind to identifying when something is contaminated, then your life can be ruined when you don't know something is wrong. If a fabric is contaminated with mildew in wool or linen fabric, in the warp or weft of linen or wool rather, or in leather or anything made of leather, and if the contamination is green or red in the fabric, the leather, the wrap, the weft, or any leather article, it is a mildew contamination, and it is to be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the contamination and quarantine the contaminated fabric for 7 days. Okay? Now, if you have something in your life that's bad, if you have a thought that's bad, and it is part of everything, how you operate. If you're not able to identify, like I was saying, or quarantine, if you're not able to look at something objectively and weigh it against some other standard outside of where you're at in your sort of in your soul, I'll just put that forth, okay? Where you're at and how good you are at life. Let me just put it that way. If you're not able to balance it against a standard that is higher than yourself, that you're striving for, then it's going to contaminate everything that you do. If you're not able to, and it's not, you can talk fabric, sure, but I'm talking about thinking. If you're depressed about something, if you're angry about something, if you're sick about something, if you're driving yourself crazy, if you're in a pit, if you're giving yourself the mirror treatment, you're looking at yourself in the mirror. If you're not able to quarantine that piece of thinking that is annihilating everything in your life and weigh it against something that is greater than your intelligence or your enlightenment, I'll just put those words forth. I don't really have better words for it. Then everything you do will be contaminated. So I came across this a few months ago, and I said, "Oh my God!" I said, "This is not." So you give it to a priest. Everything in your life can be tackled from a spiritual angle. If you're not taking the spiritual into account, then you're going to be annihilated in invisible ways that you'll never be able to understand. You know, the priest is to re-examine the contamination on the seventh day if it has spread in the fabric, the warp, the weft, or the leather. Regardless of how it is used, the contamination is harmful mildew. Okay? It is unclean. If something is unclean, if your thinking is unclean, and you're not able to isolate it, your deeds will be contaminated. Your deeds will be unclean without you realizing it, is what I'm saying. It's not about clothing. It's not about clothing. Maybe back in the day they had scabies or something like that. That's all around. I don't know. Mildew. Maybe people had a lot of mildew. I don't know. This is not about clothing. This is about thinking. He is to burn the fabric if it is unclean. The refiner's fire. If you want to refine or sort of level up or upgrade your life, you need to be able to isolate and quarantine contaminants in your thinking, because it affects the deeds. Your actions will be unclean. They need to be burned. Your clothing is filled with scabies. You got to burn it. There's something in your mind that's rotting you. You're always thinking about it. And if you're thinking about it, you're praying for it. Okay? If you're misusing your imagination by worrying, you'll be praying and amplifying the problems you have in your life if you're not able to isolate them and look at them in a sort of a spiritual lens, it's going to contaminate you, make your actions dirty. They need to be burned, but they cannot be burned unless you're able to isolate them. If you're not able to isolate those things, your thoughts and what's rotting you from the inside, it will contaminate your actions. It will contaminate all of your relationships. It will contaminate the trajectory of every hour, every day, every year of your life until you're able to burn these things out. Something that's contaminated in your life, you burn it away. There's some people out there that say you gotta make your bed and clean your room. That's something that Kermit the Frog would say to you. That's something an idiot would say to you. I want you to burn your contaminated fabrics. I mean, you could make your bed. You could also do meth. You could make your bed. You could also get locked up in Russia and put in a medically induced coma, get hit with a cattle prod with all different kinds of messages on headphones for 30 days, and then come back looking like a twisted ghost. Get out of my face. Those freaks. You might as well get the cattle prod till you go crazy. Come back like a living ghost. Look. That guy freaks me out. And when someone freaks me out, they're a freak. I mean, maybe I'll read the things he writes, but the things that come out of his mouth, there should be things going in and out of it instead. Let me put it that way.